Hi, everyone. This is Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine. I know it just goes on suddenly. And
Joanne Soike with For Better, For Worse.
today we have a special guest. We have Samantha Wiley and Liz Ford. And we're going to talk today about shelter work and how things operate there. Rescue is near and dear to both of our hearts. So we wanted to kind of get some of the ins and outs of shelter work and how they operate. So let us know you're there and we will get started. So Sam, could you tell us how you got started in rescue or in that world?
Well, I actually just got thrown into it. I started at the sheriff's department and I was always in animal control, but I just did the in-office stuff. And then when they built our shelter, they moved me out there, and then it just bombarded from there. It was here you are. This is what you got to do every day.
So how long have you been doing that work?
I've been there for 15. I've been at the shelter for 15 years, but I've been with the county for 18.
Wow. Okay. And Liz?
I, about 20 years ago, started a pet sitting business with my sister-in-law, and I was to be the business end of things. And I said we should go volunteer at the animal shelter in order to, build clientele. And I ended up starting out volunteering, doing fundraising and putting on events and things like that. And eventually started working with animals, and had been doing a lot of training with my own dog and was kind of geeky about that. And I got hired on at first for the nonprofit that raises money for the municipal shelter and became the executive director there. And then transferred over to animal services and worked for the police department as an animal care technician, animal services officer, and then director. So it was quite the path.
Wow. So could you elaborate on because I know a lot of people are familiar with the shelter, and they also hear with the breed rescues. And I know there's a huge difference between them. Could you, either one of you, speak to that? Like, what is the biggest difference? Because I think people just assume it's all one thing, and it's not. It's very different. A breed rescue versus a shelter.
Sure. So in some communities, the city or the county puts animal sheltering, animal welfare, animal services in a budget. And I would say that the monetary budget that comes from the municipal entity is probably one of the big things that makes animal shelter, city or county run animal shelter, different than a non-profit animal shelter. And then when you take a nonprofit animal shelter, you could actually subdivide that into some breed rescues. Generally speaking, those are nonprofit 501c3s. Their funding comes from a variety of sources that is donated. And so a lot of times municipal shelter is fortunate enough, and there are lots of different, they look different wherever you go. Yeah. But some of them are fortunate enough to have a 501c3 that helps them out to do things that some of those nonprofits can do, like, go sort of above and beyond the basic care that the municipality could provide for, and do, save extra lives, provide a medical fund, or, extra money for training and special things for volunteers and stuff like that. Whereas the city budget wouldn't be able to provide that. So I think that how the money comes in is one big thing that makes those two stand apart.
Sam, anything you'd like to add?
I think she said it best.
Okay. So the other thing is, like, some of the rescues, you can pick and choose what dogs you take. With a shelter, that's not really the case, right? Is that correct?
I know with our shelter, we are only allowed to take in Rock Island County's. We have to take Rock Island County animals. So if you showed up at our shelter and you didn't live within the county, it would be my discretion whether we take it or not. But Rock Island County animals, I cannot turn one away.
You have to take them no
I
matter
have to take it. Hmm.
whether, and then also with the strays and all that, you have to, does Rock Island have where they go out and pick up stray dogs, just like in Chicago, ours,
Mhm.
and we have a lot.
We have like the county has their own animal control officers, and some of the other the municipalities have their own. It's part of a contract that we have amongst all of us where they provide animal control services. And then they bring them to the shelter, and it's our job to care for them. It's county's job to care for them. So,
and care means just food, water, because that's why you have volunteers, right? Go to the shelters to walk the dogs and spend some time with them. If with certain shelters.
Our shelter, the volunteers walk the dogs. They get to pet the dog. They do the interacting with the dogs. We're taking care of their needs. We had talked about earlier, Joanne was on our board. We have a nonprofit who steps in, as Liz had explained, and helps meet needs that we wouldn't get to do if we didn't have the nonprofit. So we take care of a lot of medical needs that most of your municipal animal control facilities would not.
Mm-hmm. And would not, meaning, so they would, instead of maybe having to euthanize that dog, we'd
send it to our vet
and get it taken.
We would try.
And I know they, at least Rock Island County, they would do some things that might be considered superficial with the nonprofit, right? So say the dog has an entropion eye or cherry eye, right? Mm-hmm. The likelihood that dog's going to get adopted with that nasty looking eye, right? So they might have the funding to send that to the vet to fix it. So, the looks wise would become more adoptable.
Correct.
Okay.
Sure. And, there are things like heartworm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, when a municipal shelter gets a parvo puppy in, that's pretty serious. You don't want parvo virus in your animal shelter. And so you might need funding that comes from outside the city to support a foster program to take care of that puppy, but also a medical program to pay for everything that puppy needs to save its life, if that's possible. So for sure.
So during COVID, everybody was like, "Oh, the shelters are empty and people are adopting." Was that actually did that happen at your shelter, Sam?
We were low. I mean, lower than for cat-wise, we were really low, but we were still pretty good on dogs. It was and we've really picked up now that they've opened everything. So,
so are they returning the dogs because that's what I think we're seeing a lot of is their dogs are being they get these dogs, they're home with them, and then now that they're having to go back to life, they're returning some of those dogs back.
That was a big fear of mine. Huge fear of mine was because we were finding out what everybody wanted to adopt, and then we would show them dogs on the outside, so people didn't really get a big selection of what they wanted to do. So I was very fearful that we were going to end up with a bunch of dogs back. So far, knock on wood, we have not. I think it's going well. We sent them to Joanne for training.
Right.
You should try her. She's great.
Sam, I think that's really interesting because in a way that allowed your staff, maybe with volunteer input, to decide what dog might be the right match for someone.
Right.
And oftentimes that's a better way to get that really good long-lasting match versus when you let them go in and just pick a pretty face, right?
I agree. I liked it, but it was a lot of work, and I just don't have the staff for it. Sure. Because it took a lot. It took a lot on their part, reading through every application, reading through. And then, letting them spend time with the animal outside, that got hard sometimes, especially in the winter. It wasn't easy work, but we did it.
Because some of the rescues that we work with a little bit, they tell, they're saying some of the dogs are starting to come back. Not a lot, but just enough, and a lot more. So the dogs that you're getting in now, do they seem to have more socialization type issues? Because I know we're getting them at our facility a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing a lot more that are skittish and not socialized with people or other animals. I mean, people just couldn't go out. So, but it's not horrible. So, I mean, we have a couple that, we just introduced to Joanne last week, but I think they would have been special cases regardless of whether COVID was here or not.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you see some of the dogs that just need exposure. They usually get through it pretty quickly versus dogs that are still, having trouble. It was going to be that way anyway, right? With that,
Right.
It was going to be that way anyway.
So one of the things that I really wanted to kind of bring up and put out there, because now that social media is everywhere in our lives, when you lose a dog, oh my goodness, like back in the day, right? You called the cops or you called animal control and they came to pick up a stray and they took it to the shelter. You knew where to look. You knew the maybe 3 shelters that it might end up in. And today, if you troll any of these pages, don't take it to the shelter. Absolutely don't take it to the shelter. Hold on to it. And I don't understand how people are supposed to find their dogs when people are hanging on to them. So I think just to be a little more public about it, what happens if when somebody brings in a stray? Like, what's the protocol?
Mm-hmm. Sam, do you want to go?
I can. I didn't want to jump over yet. So we bring the dogs in, we hold them for 7 days. We look for their owners. I'm notorious. My girls who all work with us are notorious for going through the pages, but we're not required to do that. We scan it for a microchip. I still believe microchipping is the best option any animal has of getting home. We run it through our medical as they come in because we try to keep herd health down with the parvo and all of that going on. So they come in and, we go through our phone logs. We go through everything. It bugs me when people say, don't take it to the shelter. Don't take it to the shelter. But where are you going to go to look for your dog? You're going to go to somebody's house. What happens if you lose your dog and you don't have Facebook? Now you just lost the opportunity to find your dog because somebody's holding it. And I'm not saying it doesn't work out. I mean, there's great occasions that it does. Jack, stop it. My dog is right here. But it just, other than that, I mean, we try our hardest to get animals back. I know the police departments here are really good about, yeah, we took that dog to the shelter. No, we haven't seen that dog. I don't want to bash the social media for it because I think it does help on occasions, but I also think I've seen some really bad headaches of it too. These people won't give me my dog back. There's not much I can do about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I am a social media person, let's just say, and I can't bear to have the dog go spend a night on a concrete floor in a shelter, right? What would you do if I called and said, hey, if anyone calls looking for this dog, here's my number? I mean, is there anything you could do to come at me and say, you need to bring it to us? I mean, or would you take my number down and have it there?
And I know they're working on legislation right now in Illinois to make that mandatory, that it has to go to a shelter. Okay. I know the rule is right now, if it goes, because we have other shelters within our area. I'm not sure about you guys. If it goes to one of the other shelters in the area and the owner is found, they have to redeem it from animal control. So it's the other shelter's responsibility to bring it to us to redeem it. Yes, I would try very hard to make you bring the animal in. Could I make you bring the animal in? No, but I'd also notify the police department that you have the dog because in essence, you have someone's personal property.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that, everything that Sam has said is pretty much the procedure for most of the places that the place I worked at and most of the places that I've had colleagues that work at too. Yeah.
I always think about it. I don't want those people coming to my house to get their dog. And then what happens when they show up and is it registered? Is it vaccinated? Is it microchipped? I mean, all of that could be solved as if it's microchipped.
Right. And and stuff, if you put it out there on social media, is really, how do you get proof that it's the real owner? Right? How do you really know that it's that that it belongs to those people that are coming to get that dog, right? So.
Well, I mean, we vet check sometimes. If we're doubting that this is your dog, we'll start calling, oh, who's your vet? Let us call your vet. Do you have pictures of your dog? Do you have this? I mean, we go beyond the Call of Duty on some of it. And did you report your dog missing? That's my favorite one. Did you report your dog missing? No. Well, I put it on Facebook. Oh, okay. That's helpful. Everyone looks just at Facebook.
Right. I know. And then they think because everybody else, because I met a few people this weekend that are just not interested in doing that, which is fine. And
but don't lose your dog because you're not going to find it.
Right. Especially if you're not connected in some way. Yeah, because the microchipping, I agree. Like all my dogs are microchipped for that reason. And I always get it tested every so often because one of my dogs, the microchip didn't come up right away, and it was just they had to scan her somewhere else because it must have moved.
It floated.
It floated. Well, she's 13, so yeah. Now
there are a lot of municipalities that have their shelters with an ordinance that requires the animal to be chipped when it is then, sent back home with its owner. So if it isn't already chipped, it will go home with a chip.
Right.
And we ran into a few people who said, well, I don't want that to happen. I don't want you to put a microchip in my dog or cat. I want it back without one. But
keep them close.
It's the law.
Yeah. It is state law here. Everything, and the second impoundment is a mandatory neuter or spay.
Yeah.
The second one you said?
So great.
The second. They give you one shot, and then the second time is mandatory.
Illinois has so much better laws when it comes to animal welfare than Iowa. Really. Good job, Illinois.
So if your dog, if they bring your dog in the second time, they have to neuter it. You guys have to neuter it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be us. If you tell us who your vet is, we'll deliver the dog. We're really nice like that.
So, but but it has to be, if it's not spayed or neutered, it has to be, it's mandatory for it.
Mandatory. It has to be done within the next 30 days.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my other question. What do you do with dogs that are chronically keep getting lost and ending up at the shelter? Because,
we have a couple of them.
I think the better.
Like first, they're going to get a microchip, then they're going to get neutered. Generally speaking, the fees go up exponentially on the second and third and consequential, reclaims.
Yeah, that was going to be my question: was how many times before they stop paying the bill, and then it's yours?
Yeah,
yeah.
Then it's our dog.
The other thing is,
our record is 29.
Wow,
29.
That's a lot.
29. He came back every single time until the 29th time.
Was it a husky?
Nope, no. And the dog got readopted, and he's never left home. So it was just, he had younger kids who constantly opened the door, and we're like, well, stop letting the kids be in charge of the dog. But he would come in like clockwork and pick up his dog, and we would write him tickets. We would fine him. He'd pay it all. I mean, we have one wing just named after him. And his name was Chance, of all things.
Nice.
Like, it doesn't get any better than that, does it? He was the nicest dog. We loved having him. He was such a good dog. We had a parade one time. He was going to walk with us. I'm like, we know he's vaccinated. Let's take him.
That's
and
great.
he likes to walk. It's for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
And it does happen, but not for the most part. For the most part, people, the first or second time are about it. And then they're like, this isn't working. We need to do something different. But Joanne's right. We get a lot of people release them based on that.
A lot of people
Release their animal.
Oh, okay. Because they don't want to keep paying.
Well, by the third or fourth time, they're having problems keeping that dog in. There's huskies are good ones for it, but yeah.
We had a husky show up to my place of business by himself, and the owners eventually drove up to get him.
It's because he knew where the husky lady worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I'm coming in.
Yeah, he did. He came in. He was hanging out, and then we see a truck come by, and
Yeah.
And he just happened to stop at our door because, you know, we have dogs. So
there's so many situations, you know, social and family and, you know, problems of the world, financial problems and things like that. And there are reasons that a dog ends up at a shelter. And sometimes it's right for the dog to go back to that home. And sometimes it's better that the dog, you know, doesn't get reclaimed back in that home. And I think that, you know, those repeat ones like Sam was articulating, there's, you know, usually by about that third or fourth time, there's some disconnect between that dog and its family already. And, you know, it's probably time to find it a more fitting home for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how are you handling like how do you guys, if people come in, and I know we talked, Sam mentioned earlier about taking the dogs out and, you know, trying to find matches, but usually people come in, they're interested in the dog, and they just have to fill out an application and adopt it. Is that how it works?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So Deb had a question. Can you refuse to return a dog to its owner?
Absolutely. But it depends on the law. And you know what? The law is going to be different between Iowa City, Johnson County, and, you know, where Sam's at, and Rock Island, and another state. So, yeah, absolutely.
It's tough. It is. I mean, we definitely charge the fees and charge the fines, and a lot of times what we try to do is educate them on how can you keep the dog inside? How can you how can you make it a better situation for the dog? But in Illinois, it's property, so we're kind of hard pressed. We'd have to get the state's attorney involved if it got to that. And I have to say, in 15 years, I've really never had any situation where those people haven't already released the dog. Does that make sense?
Yes, that
Sure.
they eventually just give it up.
Correct.
Sure. And when I answered the question, I guess I was referring in general, not necessarily to reclaims, but I'm sure with Sam, with all of, you know, because she's doing animal control and law enforcement work too, there are times that you don't give someone their animal back and they're not going to get it back. And it's because of the way that animal is treated, you know, welfare cases and things like that.
Right.
Not necessarily it just got out and got loose. So.
Right. So when the dogs come into the shelter, what is the process to get them to determine if they're adoptable or not? Do you guys have I know you guys have a way of vetting them to see if they're able to be adopted or not. So what are some of the big determinations, or what are some of the big things that you look for to decide if the dog's adoptable or not?
So in Iowa City, if we had the opportunity, if it was an owner relinquished and we had the opportunity to talk to an owner or family member, that's kind of where that process started, because the more information that you can get from that person, if you can have, you know, an honest conversation with them and really, you know, try to convince them that you want to do best by the animal. And so you need to know everything about the animal and make that a conversation, not just a fill out this form and give it back to me. That's, I think, where it starts. And then you got to let an animal decompress for a little bit too. And you might just have a few staff people working with it first. And then gradually you might add some more of your experienced volunteers, and then all volunteers, depending on the animal's temperament. And I think your assessment and your placement is the input from as many places as you can get it. So it might be a former owner, it would be staff people who are interacting and volunteers that are interacting with the dog. And ultimately you're going to have a couple people who are, or a person or volunteer or someone that makes a decision to place an animal. And you're going to hopefully be looking at what kind of environment is going to set this animal up for success. And that's where we should place it. And if you also have to make a determination on the other side that the animal isn't safe to place, that it's not going to be safe for the community to put this animal back out into the community, someone makes that decision, that then that animal is going to be euthanized. And of course, there are lots of animals that fall in between there that need more than just a kennel and a shelter to find a new home. They need some time at Joanne's or some time at Nancy's, or maybe they are, going back to that first question, maybe it's a specific breed, and a breed rescue who really understands the characteristics and breed traits is the best place to put that animal in the interim until it finds the right home. So hopefully that answers a question from my perspective, at least.
And I would just follow up with, we've went so far as to call, like you said, past owners. We have them fill out a sheet, and then when they bring it in, the shelter coordinator will kind of ask a bunch of questions, and then we'll actually call them later if we still aren't feeling like we know where they were coming from, or and have a conversation on the telephone. Sometimes it's easier when they're not standing there face to face to give you all the details and not tell you, okay, the dog does this, the dog does that. And it just seems easier. Like, they're out of the situation. They're already upset for releasing their dog. And then when we can ask them as many questions as possible, like she said, it's the more information we have, the better we are to place them. And then we reach out to rescues as much as we can for animals that maybe are just animals we can't place in the right home. Like, just somebody walking in going, oh, look at that cute, we have a Malinois right now. Look at that cute Malinois. We really should have this dog at home. No, this dog needs to go to somebody who understands that breed, and not the cuteness of it or the look of the dog. So
Right.
I have 6 kids, and we watched that movie, and it looks nice.
it's cute. The Dalmatian's great, or the Chihuahua.
Oh my God.
So Deb asked, do you work with foster homes in the community, or to get them out of the shelter when you can? Or I know that's kind of tough being on, city and municipality law, but can you talk a little about that?
I really can't send them out of the shelter until they're our property. So we have to wait that 7 days. And by that 7 days, we've kind of determined, okay, this dog is something we can place on our floor. It's something I need to call Joanne about. We have a couple dogs right now we've had since March and April that we have one of our really good volunteers working with. So taking it and putting it in a home and then bringing it back is not the easiest thing to do. So what we try to keep them within, unless it is like cats. Cats, we're looking for people to foster for that time until we get all the kitten shots on board and get them well and get them into adopted homes.
One of the really great benefits of a foster home, particularly for a dog, is in a real home environment, you get to know a little bit more about what that dog is like. And I think that if you're in a position to be able to have a good foster dog program and to be able to have the extra funding to do it, that's ideal. But, as I think we all can agree, a lot of the dogs that we're seeing come into shelters in general these days aren't the dogs of 10 or 20 years ago. They're not the litters of lab mix puppies, and they're harder dogs. And whether it's because of COVID or just because of how, what we're doing with dogs in society is today, but they're harder dogs. Those dogs are harder to put in foster because a lot of times they're dogs that don't get on really great with other dogs. And they need somebody's guidance, like they need a trainer's guidance, the foster does, to really help live with that dog, just like an eventual adopter would. So I love foster programs when you can do it and when you can make it work, but it certainly comes with its own set of challenges.
So Liz, why do you think because I've noticed that too, like from a training perspective, like there's a lot more dogs that are not good with other dogs, a lot more dogs that are not good with people, or that are more environmentally sensitive dogs than ever before. Because we've been training dogs for 30 plus years, and yeah, we got those every so often, but now it seems like almost every behavior private is that. It's like the dog is nervous and they have to be medicated. I feel like before I would maybe recommend, I don't know, medication for like 1 or 2% of the dogs that came through my doors, which is not very many. Like out of 100 dogs, maybe 1 or 2 would need meds. Now I'm like, oh my God, it's like, no,
Pass it out like candy.
it's ridiculous. It really, they just need medication to be able to deal and to be able to get them trained and be able to get them in a point where they can function in the world and they can be relaxed enough to learn and all that. So I'm just like, I mean, more than ever before, like now, it seems like it's more. I'm just like,
absolutely. And I think that, there's so many different reasons that go into that, but I'm just going to throw out a couple of them. And one I would say is that, like, society has changed. The way that we live with our dogs is different. And we do have a bunch of laws and, fencing and leashing requirements and things like that. Whereas, in some communities 30 years ago, we didn't even have those. In some bigger cities we did, but in some more rural communities, we didn't have those laws. So laws have changed and gotten better and safer for communities as we grow, as population grows, including the population of dogs. And I also think that, where are people getting dogs now? When I was a kid and we got my first dog, we went to a breeder, and it was, a home that had these beautiful English Springer Spaniels, and they had like 2 litters a year, and I picked out my puppy, and that's where we got our dogs most of the time, was from some local breeder in the area. And now a lot of people are getting dogs from, a source that I don't think is a good breeder source. And that means not good genetics as far as behavioral traits, or genetics, behavioral traits that are appropriate for that breed, but yet maybe that breed isn't appropriate for that home.
right.
And so, there's so many factors, I think, that go into why are dogs ending up in shelter now, and what kind of dogs are, and why are they getting, why are they ending up there?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, no, and we that's true. And we've had a lot of dogs that, I mean, people go to the store and buy them, and that's the problem. And in some cases, every once in a blue, and we, when people come in and, we just bought this puppy from, whatever store, and it's like, okay, so, and it's really hard because you don't want them to feel bad about their decisions.
Right.
But you also want to educate them so that they don't get they don't go back to the.
Sure. And hoping that some of your education to them, while you're going to help them keep their puppy as a trainer, can reach maybe some of their family and their friends and things like that, so that they know the struggles they're having with their puppy. Maybe it's, potty training issues or socialization issues or something like that, that they kind of relate back to where that puppy came from, and that, the breeding, meaning the genetics of mom and dad,
right,
and the living conditions of that
right,
dog when she delivered her puppies in the early stages, and the lack of all the things those baby puppies should have. So,
yeah. And that's why the shelters are busier. And I think, and I know Joanne and I have had very long discussions about, like, the rescue and shelter world. It's like, I think we're wagging the dog in that we need to educate the general public, but it takes a lot of time and money to educate the general public, and it also it takes a long time to make that shift in that public.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just like you said earlier, they're all on social media. It's more important for them to show a cute picture of their puppy on social media than to spend 3 months deciding who's a good breeder for my puppy.
Or what's a good breed.
Instant gratification and all about, what, the social media stuff and appearances, when, ultimately what they really want is they want a trainer to turn their challenging, poorly socialized, troublesome puppy into the dog that they should have worked to find in the beginning, right?
Right. Because so Karen was asking, how much of or the foe of the trend is the designer breeds are contributing to more dogs in the shelter? Or you know,
We don't get a lot of doodle mixes.
But you sure do in training.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, we do. Yes, we
But
do.
we have a long list of people who want the doodle mixes.
Interesting. Interesting.
Long list.
Yeah.
That one, but yeah, so you guys aren't getting doodles in the shelter then. Interesting.
I would tell you probably last year I saw 3.
Oh,
And one the lady's having, I mean, I think I talk to her once a month.
wow. So are you getting more? Because I know here we have pitties just all over the place. Lots.
We get a predominant amount of pit bulls.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem to be that doesn't seem to be reducing either, which is
No.
And I don't know why why is that? It's like the dogs are, and it's like and some of the dogs are great, but a lot of even the ones that are great with people are sometimes not so great with other dogs, mostly.
That's a tough one for us. We have a lot of dogs that are just one dog only. Like you said, the whole foster program, trying to find people to take it. Well, it's one dog only. Most of your fosters are people who have 2 and 3 dogs.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, going from the shelter world into working as a private trainer continues to be very eye-opening for me, right? I remember one of the dogs I placed before I left the shelter was a pit bull who we took in on. She was tied outside and full of, skin issues and emaciated. And we took her from the owner, and the judge signed her over to us, and we rehabilitated her. And we had a dog foster program, not big and thriving, but it was a dog foster program. And she went to a couple of new fosters, and she went to them when she was still weak. She was still gaining weight. She was still getting over her skin issues and things like that. And she filled up and, flourished with them. Brand new dog fosters, not new to dogs, but like had never fostered before, had never had a problem dog before. And as she matured and grew, so came her dog reactivity, really serious dog reactivity. And so I was at the shelter at the time guiding these folks through how to train this dog and how to handle the dog and how to help the dog and how to reduce her fears and build her confidence. And they ended up wanting to adopt her. They put so much heart and work into that. They adopted her. And, there was lots of counseling, like, this is going to be tough. This is going to be challenging. And, but we're here to support you. But of course, from the shelter perspective, we were like, thank God that they're keeping her. She, just like Sam said, she'd be in a kennel. She'd be a hard dog to place. She'd be there for a long time. And so it was so great that we were able to send her home. But those people have continued to struggle with her for the last 2 years. And they reached out to me as a trainer now for continued help with her. And I've gone back with them and done privates and coaching and things like that. Their life has changed completely. They can't go anywhere. They can barely walk that dog because she is so reactive. Medications, vet behaviorists, everything. And I feel sad almost that I fostered that dog with them, and they love her, and I'm glad that they love her, and I know she loves them too. But it's such a different perspective coming from, oh my gosh, we found this dog a home, thank goodness. She's hard to place. This is going to be great. And now I'm on this other side of the fence helping these people. It is a daily struggle, and it kind of breaks my heart. Mm-hmm. And I worry that sometimes we, and I still say we as I'm still at the shelter, that we do that to fosters and adopters with those dogs that are so hard to place.
Well, and I'll be honest, we're having, because yes, we are as trainers, we're on the other side of these people getting this dog they didn't sign up for a project.
That's right.
They just wanted a dog to love and to have. And now they have this huge project, and then there's a lot of guilt and a lot of emotions that go with that, right? Because they feel like they're failures because they can't get the, you know what I mean, because it's a problem. And we see it a lot with people who adopt the pit bulls. That seems to be, and it's not that, I mean, I love the breed and I think it's great, but some of these rescues are just like, oh, it's, you know, people are just biased on the breed. It's like, no, a lot of these pitties or pit mixes are coming from really bad breeding. So,
Yeah.
so it's like, it's not anything that anybody did. It's just what it is. Right. And then you cannot, especially that you cannot just adopt it out to people. Cause I just saw, you know, I see it all the time and it's like, how can you have possibly adopted this dog out to this person? It's and in some cases it's a liability waiting to happen because a dog is extremely, especially they're adopting these breeds out that are aggressive to people. It's like,
Yeah.
What are you doing?
And I'll tell you, when I first joined that board, I was a very young trainer at the time, right? And I was much more like, just gotta spend more time with them, and we just gotta do this, and we can help them all. And it's like, you know, you spend more time with that, and you're just not there. But I mean, poor Sam. I just remember, as she says, you know, you're on a board like that, and there's an awful lot of feelings. So
lots of feelings.
So, you know, I mean, poor Sam has to take the attack of all of these people. Like, you know, why would you want to kill this dog? And I think it's a really tough topic, but it's kind of important to talk about from a shelter perspective, right? Because working with you more and more, you know, and Liz, I'm sure it's the same story with you, right? You would have a sleepless night or bend over backwards to not have to euthanize a dog. So,
Right.
You know, people think, oh, these shelters, you know, and unfortunately, you know, Nancy, you're in Cook County. So, you know, you have Chicago Animal Care and Control. They do have to euthanize for space, right? I mean, they do. But, you know, I remember working with Sam, like, where can we put this dog? Where can we stash this dog and the new one? Or, you know, and I don't think you euthanize for space. Like, I don't ever remember that.
I have yet to euthanize for space. And you know what? I hope that till the day I retire, that is exactly what I can still say is I've not had to euthanize for space. But I'm a mom and I'm a grandma. And I will tell you this. I look at some of them. We've been working with a dog since March that I'm trying to place. I don't think it's a bad dog. I think it was a project, as you called it, that somebody bought from a breeder because it's not a mix. It's a definite full bred dog. And they didn't put the effort into the project. I think all dogs are projects.
Yeah.
It's just some are easier projects than others.
Exactly.
But so I pray to God that I don't ever have to say I euthanized for space, number one. And number two, that I have to look in the face of some little child that got mauled because I tried to save the wrong dog.
Right.
And that's my sleepless nights. And I know from the people that have retired that have worked with me from when we opened, Joanne knows them, and the shelter coordinator that I have now. I mean, ultimately, whenever we heard about a child being mauled, we would be on the phone with each other going, oh God, don't let it be one we adopted. You know what I mean? It's gut wrenching some days where you go, I want to save as many as possible, but I'm not going to live next door to that dog. You know?
Well, and the problem is, like, for me as a trainer, like, I do ask, I go, where did you get this dog? Like, where did you get it? Because wow,
who gave this to you?
Who gave this dog to you? And I'm like, so then it's difficult to, in my position, it's like, okay, yeah, probably shouldn't have got this dog. I mean, it's a very difficult conversation to have. And in some cases, you know, we tell them, it's like, you got to return the dog. You know, especially dogs that have, you know, the reactivity is one thing, because the truth is, you know, a dog can live a okay life being reactive-ish. You know, the people have to adjust theirs, but a dog that has any kind of human situation, it's really very, very, it's difficult because it's like somebody's going to get hurt. I mean, there's a threat of, there's a safety issue there. And so, and when I see that, you got to return it. You can't keep this dog. Because it's like, you know, unless it's and sometimes you have people that have done really great things and the dogs are fine, but usually in my experience, it's been not a good thing. Right?
I'd have more respect for somebody walking in and saying, I took this to the trainer and even the trainer thinks I need to return this dog. I would love that, because the first thing somebody says to me is, well, this dog is this. Have you done any training with the dog? Have you taken it to a trainer? If it's dog aggressive, let me give you the names of trainers that do it privately. But and dogs that we know don't get along with other dogs, we suggest that right away. And that's part of the project. It's part of the money. I mean, it happens. There's expense. It's just like kids. When you have a child that you're going to have to pay for high school. High school's expensive. Grade school's expensive. When you have a dog, you have to pay for training. And I think that's what I see a lot is untrained dogs, unsocialized, untrained. And I'm guessing that breeding has a lot to do with it. A lot.
Well, and I think that's the key. That's it right there. The majority, because I think I when I was doing a lot more rescue work, I did look at a survey, and what's the number one reason dogs are surrendered to the shelter is lack of training. Lack of training. Lack of training. That's it. That's the number one reason, because the dog's still peeing in the house, or it's doing all these awful behaviors, and people just can't take it. But they're also
eating my house. Did you kennel it? Well, it doesn't like the kennel. Oh,
right. And we're having. Well, don't get me on that. 20 or 30 years ago, everybody was crate treating their dogs. Everybody was. Like, that wasn't such a big deal. Now I don't understand it. I'm trying to figure out when and how that changed. Because now it's like the dog doesn't like it. Well,
like your couch?
It's like, but so I think I think Liz alluded to it earlier. Society has changed. It's like, oh, you don't want to upset it. I have rescued 7 dogs at different times and a lot of them were not crate trained. But I crate trained every single one of them. Was it easy on all of them? Was it easy? No. Some were easier than others. But I'm like, I knew that is such an important skill. And people he doesn't like it. Well, you can help them like it and change their mind about it. But now
training.
Oh my God. I can't tell you how many, and it makes my head explode. It's like, he doesn't like.
I'm not laughing at you, but these conversations are just like the waiting room some days.
It's like, oh my God, just crate training the dog. And they won't eat your house, and they will be potty trained, and all those wonderful things will happen. And it doesn't mean that they have to do that for life, but initially it's a great thing. But yeah, that is still a thing. It's like, I'm trying to figure out when it changed to what it is now.
My youngest dog is 7 years old. That was my puppy that I got. Joanne, you still should have talked me out of it, but I still put them in. They have to go in the basement or they will eat my entire house. They think that the pantry is their domain. The rice is everywhere. No, I don't want to be mad at you. You can have the basement. They have full run of the basement and they're perfectly fine with it. It gives them a comfort.
Yeah. And my dogs have all been crate trained, and now they're older. They don't have to be anymore, but I can still put them in a crate if I need to, and they're happy in it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an important tool, just to help them feel good and safe in there. Right?
Yeah. And I had a couple I had a min pin that hated it, and it took me a long time to help her like it. But towards the end of she lived to be 13, and I got her when she was like 1.5 years. But most of her life, she was totally cool with it. Right. Totally cool with it. She was happy in it. It just took me longer. It took me 1 year to get her happy in it. But I did it. It's like, but now it's like you see that, oh, we don't want to, they're upset. I don't, they came from a shelter, or they came from a rescue, and they're so upset. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know, but they have to go in a crate. They have to learn how to be in a crate. I had another question. So Liz, I have, it's going from being in the shelter to training. What would you say, or what would you want? And I think this was a Joanne question. It was a good one. What are 3 things you wish the people would know? Like, so that would be for both of you, like that they would know before, so that the dog isn't surrendered to the shelter.
You mean we would want adopters to know?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Or dog owners.
Or Doug?
I think that it's hard because I'm already in the middle of my new perspective as a trainer. But again, I would think that, you know, that making the right match thing that we always talk about, and in the shelter world, get the right fit, get the right match, pick a dog for your personality kind of stuff. I think that is so incredibly important. And maybe we need to figure out a better way to phrase that so that it becomes the way of, you know, that people look for an animal, right? Like you said earlier, Nancy, educating people, but really helping them understand the why behind it too. Because, you know, Samantha was talking about a Belgian Terrier or whatever it was. Malinois puppy. Well, that is not for everyone.
No.
And it doesn't mean that someone living in an apartment in, you know, Chicago can't have it if they do dog sports, right? And if they belong to a dog club. But just really researching the breed. And oftentimes when you're in a shelter, you do get a purebred in, or you get a dog that looks mostly purebred. And so you can sort of go, well, you know, this is a Malinois, or that's a husky. A lot of huskies in shelters too. But the other side of that is shelters, private or municipal shelters, don't have a lot of extra money to do the kind of DNA testing to determine what a mixed breed dog might be. But I think it's really important to look at the breed of the dog and the characteristics that come with that breed. Like, you know, what is the husky going to do that you aren't going to like? It's probably going to run. It wants to run. It's an independent dog, a northern breed, you know, versus something like a spaniel or a hound. And look at the traits that come with the breeds that make up that dog and figure out if that's what you can live with in the next 2 months, in the next 2 years, in the next 18 years, or however long that dog is going to live. And that's not 3 things, that's 1 thing. But so, you know, making that match, but taking it to the next level, I think is so important. And, you know, as Samantha said earlier, training is a part of the project. You know, your kid might need braces. They're going to need books. They got to go to high school. You're going to send them to college. Plan for that stuff and plan for college for your dog too. You know?
Right.
Maybe a couple sessions.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say is, you know, let them be a dog, right? Let them do dog things. Do that enrichment stuff that everybody's talking about nowadays. Figure out what your dog likes to do and do it with your dog. Let your dog do it. Give it opportunities to do those things. Yeah. Sometimes those naughty behaviors like digging, you know, in the rock garden for the chipmunks is because you adopted a terrier. And that's a natural, normal, fun, innate behavior in a terrier. Rather than ask the trainer to get out their magic wand and fix your dog, let's talk about how we can, you know, let your dog do some of that activity and it's safe and keep your garden okay. And, you know, so that your dog is happy and that you're happy too.
Right. Well, yeah, because I think that's a lot of the issue, right? They adopt a dog that they really don't have the lifestyle, because we did have somebody that adopted a Vizsla from the Vizsla Rescue, and they live in a condo in downtown Chicago. However, they're avid runners, and they take the dog to the beach and they go hiking, and the dog is totally fine because
they're working it. They're doing something with the dog
every time, right? So that was one of those exceptions, because, you know, and then you know, we've had people, oh, they have a beach in an apartment. It's like, it's all over the place. Yeah. it's bred to work for hours. So yeah, it's going to be busy for a long time. but yeah, that was what I remember, that adoption. It was like the dog, yeah, they ran, they took it to the beach. They did all kinds of stuff with it. So the dog was like totally fine in a condo in downtown Chicago. Was totally happy. But they had that. So
I feel like I need some of your adopters.
Well, those didn't happen a lot.
Okay. That makes me feel better. Thank you.
Yeah. No.
You're
a lot
doing it wrong, Sam. No, I'm just kidding. I said you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, it's and the other thing that Liz alluded to, it's like you're not going to take one session and the dog's going to be trained. I mean, I wish we were that good, but we're
You guys brought your wand, didn't you?
yeah. It's like no, it takes lots and lots of classes, and it's so funny because some of our students that do dog sports, they realize that how important it is to keep the dog busy and working, and they're also have embraced it and are really enjoying it. Like Deb, that's on the call, she has a rescue that's dog reactive, but she does nose work, and the dog is really thriving, doing fantastic. She's doing great. She'll every once in a while be blah blah blah, but for the most part, it's not very serious. She's small and she enjoys her life, and she's got a great life with Deb. And so sometimes it works out, like, and Jennifer mentioned about, sometimes you adopt a dog and it becomes after a while a great dog, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. And it's finding people understanding if you're going to adopt this dog, this is going to be a lot of work, right? You're just not going to be taken home and it's going to be because, and I know in Illinois it's property, but some people really, really do treat a dog like property. And they just want it to be in there. Look what I have. I have a whatever it is, and they don't want to train it and do anything with it. It's like no, it needs training.
Yeah. Deb, don't get me started on that. People who send their dogs up for away training can't do it. But so I wanted to get back to that question though, because I think Liz has a shelter now trainer perspective. I would like to get Sam's. What are your 3 things that you wish the general public would know?
Well, I have a list. I wish everybody would be so open to the spay, neuter, and vaccinate. I mean, like, we educate more people walking through the door about spaying and neutering and educating than we do getting an animal. So that one's big for me: the spay, neuter, educate, or vaccinate. Also, that animal control isn't the enemy. I mean, we're not the enemy. We go there every single day, and I have a small staff, but we go every single day and we try our hardest to save as many lives as possible. I mean,
right.
It's incredible how many people walk in and just instantly hate us or instantly we're negative, we're the bad. But all we want to do is help them, and we want the animal to get into the right home, definitely the right home. And that my 3rd one was it's our goal to save as many animals as possible, not to euthanize.
Right.
I don't like to euthanize. It's the worst part of my job.
Yes, I can imagine. And I used to do a lot of assessments for different breed rescues, and I had to slow down because I felt like the Grim Reaper, because it's like many dogs that they brought me to assess. I'm like, it's like, no.
I feel like I've done that to Joanne a couple times. So
I was just gonna say,
the shelter director, we're sorry.
Maybe that's when I stopped coming by the last couple of days.
You're like, no.
Yeah. But Sam said it really. You just can't put that on your conscience. Where are you willing to take a chance with your son or daughter or niece or nephew, or are you willing to put yourself in the responsible seat for a maybe? And it's just so hard because I would love to, but I would never forgive myself if I'm like, well, I see a lot of stuff here that I wouldn't like, but let's give it a shot. It's just not fair. But
right. So Samantha, why should people go to the shelter to look for a pet? Like, why choose a shelter instead of anything else? Right? Why? Well,
I mean, I don't want it to sound like I wouldn't go to a breeder. I might. I mean, I think breeders are good too if they're good breeders. What we get, we don't deal with a lot of good breeders. Yeah. The good breeders you're not going to deal with in the
right.
Let's
see their dogs.
But the animals at the shelter do deserve another chance, and I think that we have some great animals there. I think that they have quirks. They might be a little project. Listening to you tell about the people that adopted that dog and all the work that they put into it, it's hard to find owners like that. It really is. I mean, people to change their lives for an animal are far and few between. So But there are a lot of great animals, even pit bulls on the floor, because we have lots of them. But and if I could bring more pitties home, I would. I just have a real territorial one who she said, no thanks. We want no more people here. But so I don't agree with animals being property either, just so we're clear.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the laws that we have to follow. So
yeah, because they're not. I mean, I don't. You're right. I don't feel the same way, but
right. But people do, and
yes,
that's their way. It's not mine.
Yep.
But go ahead, Liz.
I was just going to say, just to back up what Sam is saying, there's also there's her and her staff and her volunteers that do really get to know these animals, and oftentimes they're not puppies, or maybe you get a few puppies in, or they're older puppies, right?
Right.
Or they're 2 years old, so they don't have to deal with the puppy or adolescent stage. And that's actually kind of a benefit, because some of that personality and those traits are kind of formed already. And so if you have people in your shelter getting to know those animals, they're the best ones to talk to when it comes to, is that the right one for me? Because they've spent so much time getting to know them. So it's a great place to go to look for a dog, and to find out, if you don't have the dog for me here today, where would you direct me to, or what education would you give me? I mean, their shelters are a great source of resources for people looking for help for anything: spay, neuter, adoption, whatever.
Right.
So let me ask you, if somebody calls your shelter and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a shepherd mix," Deb, click, wink, wink, a shepherd mix male that, could be a puppy, could be a little older dog, but you may not have that particular list. The particular, they want it to be social with people, good with dogs, but may require training, of course, which they should give. Is it, and I know with a small shelter it's hard, because sometimes those dogs do come across and you're like, oh, I know somebody who's looking for that. That's how we've placed a lot of dogs. Like there's a dog that's looking for a home, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know somebody who might be interested in that particular dog, and then we make that connection, and voila, the dog is a home. But it's one of those things. I know a lot of the staff, the shelters don't have the staff to follow up and say, hey, this person's looking for a shepherd, and if a shepherd happens to show up, or a herding breed happens to show up, that you would call that person and say, hey, we might have a dog that's interested. Is there any kind of program like that?
Not with us. We don't have enough people. I mean, if Joanne called me and said, hey, if you get a shepherd in, let me know, I would text her, hey, I got a shepherd in.
Okay.
Other ways, if somebody I didn't have that connection to, because I'm going to remember it because I'm going to talk to Joanne about another dog, or something. You know what I mean?
At some point.
But
right.
if I didn't have that, I would send that person to German Shepherd Rescue. Go check with them. They have shepherds, and do you understand the breed you're getting? Maybe you should look at that before you determine that you definitely want a shepherd.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Hey.
I like shepherds. Nice.
Yeah, but they don't. Historically, shepherds don't do very well at the shelters.
They don't. I will tell you, that is one breed that I try to move pretty fast at getting it into rescue.
They do not do well at the shelter. They just
neither do the Dobermans.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. Well, I would call you right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other problem is once I put them on the floor, like say it's a quirky shepherd and it's got this or it's got that, and I put it on the floor, everybody that walks in there wants that shepherd. No, you don't. It's beautiful, but no.
Yeah. Right.
So.
Yeah. So.
I mean, and I don't know that I should say this publicly, but I'm gonna that's kind of what I love about working with Sam, right? Is because they may have those dogs that are not on the adoption floor, right? And that's particularly why. Let's just take my dog, for instance. You guys have all heard me talk about my crazy Doberman. He would get 70 adoptions in the first 3 days, or applications, right? In the first 3 days. And he would be returned in the next 3 days. Because, right, he's gorgeous and he's very looking. nobody wants that in their house, right? He's way too much dog. So, but people don't, they shut off their ears too at that moment. When they see something, they stop listening to anything you're trying to tell them. So it's just tough.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, because they fall in love with what the dog looks like.
Yep.
And it's like, no, you have to see what the person.
Ooh, our internet's going bad.
Yeah. Anyway, do you guys have anybody out there have any other questions? So one of the reasons we wanted to kind of do this is to kind of remind people that the shelters are there and they have dogs that probably that deserve a chance. And a lot of times it seems to me, and I could be totally off base on this, and not to knock any of the breed rescues, but it seems like the dogs that come from some of the shelters are a little bit vetted a little bit better than at least as a trainer. I'm seeing a little bit more the dogs that are coming from the shelters. They're a little bit, they have quirks, but they're minor quirks. They're not biting people or trying to kill other dogs. Where some of the breed rescues, some of those are slipping through a little bit. So,
Yep. So I just had one more question for you guys, because I think it's important to put that out into the public as well, which is, you don't get allocated that much budget for what you do, right?
Yeah.
You do have your nonprofits that support you. So what are some of the ways that you fundraise and some of the ways that you can raise money to help go the extra mile for the animals?
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, Joanne, you know what we do. We do tons. We do appeal letters, golf outings. We had a garage sale. It went well. I'm not a garage sale person, but it did go well. We do events at the shelter, trivias. I mean, anything and everything we can to raise funds. Sometimes I feel like that's my only date night is what pause event we're going to go to this weekend. So
Your social life is covered until you retire.
yeah, we got it.
Then what will you do?
What about you, Liz? What did you guys do?
Oh, the same. And, this kind of, it reminds me of a topic that we talked about a little bit earlier with regards to, services and whether or not what animals you can take in, if you can take in animals from outside your jurisdiction or not. And, our yearly budget was just under $1 million. And then we had a nonprofit, supplementing for some of those special programs. And, that's taxpayer money, right? I mean, was a city budget. And I think that, you're, as a shelter employee, you serve the public, and, animal welfare and public safety are a big part of what you do.
yes.
And you're accountable almost really like to that budget, right? And into your community and that funding. And so I think it's important to note that, budgeting is important, and it's heavy in that time of year, whenever, time of year you're budgeting, Samantha. It's
here.
Yeah, it is definitely a really hard time. And if you decide you're going to take in animals from, wherever you want to take in animals, maybe you're going to start transferring animals up from the South, as many, nonprofits and other places are able to do, which is good. But your taxpayer money is coming for animals in your community, not for those. And so you better, if you're going to do that stuff, you better decide that you're going to raise extra money to put it in your budget for that. So I'm not sure that that's probably a little bit more than the answer to your question, but I think it's important for people to understand the difference within, a municipal shelter is really, it's a service to keep your animals in your community safe and to keep you safe from animals that might hurt you in your community. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does, because it is a really important, and that's why we wanted to because a lot of people go to the breed rescues, but we really wanted people to consider going to the shelters now, because you're right, people think of the shelters as the enemy, and it's like, no, the enemy is not as having a dog that's not trained and not doing right by the dog, and that's how they end up at the shelter. And basically, the shelters are just trying to stop the flow of trying to keep everybody safe, and it's a very, very difficult job. And I think trying to educate people on training their dogs, and maybe going there to get their next dog, is a pretty viable choice, right? I used to go and pull dogs from the shelter, and we always used to say, for your canine, we will train your dog and give you another one.
Actually a good plan.
To train.
I have some dogs for you to give, just so you know.
Yeah.
We'll make a photo wall.
Yeah, exactly. Because when I used to go in and pull dogs from the shelter, and we kept keeping at the facility and we train them, that somebody would say, "Oh, what's that dog?" And they'd end up just adopting another dog and taking it home. So, but some of the, like you said, the shepherds that don't do well and the Dobermans, we were fostering a lot of Dobermans for the very same reason, because they just weren't doing well at the shelter. But is making sure that people think of it as a viable place to get a dog, because I think the dogs are a little screened. Not, it varies depending on where it is, but they're screened a little bit better. They're not going to put a potentially dangerous dog out into the world. Mostly, chances are slimmer that you'll get that versus, maybe a dog reactive one, but you're not going to get a dog that's going to bite people, which is like my pet peeve. You cannot adopt a dog out that's going to hurt a person. I mean, it's the public safety part that Liz mentioned. It's like, can't do it. I mean, sometimes we all, sometimes they slip through, but it shouldn't be a regular occurrence, right?
Right. I know that you're probably going to wind this down soon, and so I want to make sure that I say this: how much I appreciate, Nancy and Joanne, that you do these things, because I love that you're reaching out to the community and educating people on lots of different aspects that benefit the relationship between humans and animals, right? So I appreciate that, and I wish and I hope that more people like Nancy and Joanne and Sam will work together. I know you guys are, Sam and Joanne are already working together a lot, and Nancy works with shelters. And I really hope that this can inspire some of those other trainers out there and people to get involved with your local shelter and get involved with the rescue, and for trainers to do so as well, because we're all really want the same thing in the end.
Right. Right. For sure. And that's absolutely, that's why I told when Joanne and I decided to do this, it's like, no, that was like my goal, just to educate people on different things and just expose people to as many different things that are out there. I think there's more to do. It's just figuring out how to do it and how to reach more people. But for now, this has been a year now that we've been doing it. So it's like, okay, now we need to probably go to the next level. It's just figuring out how to do that is going to be the challenging part.
Yeah. So all of you out there watching, and anybody, right, there is so many topics that we have covered. So share them with your friends, and hopefully it gets shared and shared and shared. And really, in the end, I mean, it's just the goal of making lives better for dogs, really, right?
Yeah, because sometimes like a lot of the stuff that's out there, a lot of people don't even know. Like, oh, that's a sport, that's a thing, that's a, it's like,
that'll work my dog, so my dog won't be crazy at home.
Yeah, right. Well, that's how I got into the dog sports anyway. I had a little Pomeranian, I call him an Escaranian. That was a nightmare, and he was a pain in the neck. When I took him out and we did agility, and here I am, 30 plus years later, and
he was a happier dog.
Yeah, and so, but it also now with the rescue, and I had 7 rescues at the time, so that was a very, it was a good time though. I would never change it. Like they all were quirky in their own way, so it was a good thing. All right, thank you, ladies, so much for coming on and talking about it. And I think there's like a lot more topics that I'd like to address, and maybe have you guys back on at some point and talk a little bit more about other, other things. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.